Commander Alan Pierce stared out the viewport of the transport ship as it approached the massive Galactic Council station. The structure looked like a giant wheel spinning slowly in space, with spokes extending from a central hub. Lights twinkled across its surface, marking the homes and offices of thousands of alien diplomats. Pierce sighed and adjusted his plain gray diplomatic uniform. After 30 years in Special Forces and another 10 years working secret missions for Omega Division, the last thing he wanted was to play nice with aliens who looked down on humans. He was a soldier, not a talker. His large hands, now clasped behind his back, had taken more lives than he cared to remember. "We'll dock in 20 minutes, Commander," said the pilot over the intercom. Pierce nodded even though the pilot couldn't see him. He picked up the datapad from the small table in his private cabin and reviewed the files one more time. The Galactics Council had 17 different alien species as members. Humans were the newest to join space travel, and they were only given observer status 2 years ago. Many council members didn't want humans involved at all. The door to his cabin slid open, and Admiral Carol Bennett walked in. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and a stern face that rarely smiled. "Are you ready?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Pierce replied. "Still think this is a mistake. I'm a soldier, not a diplomat." Bennett's lips curved into a rare small smile. "That's exactly why you're perfect for this job." She sat down across from him and lowered her voice. "Our last 3 diplomats came back injured or sick. Accidents, they called them. The Council is testing us, seeing how much we can take before we react." Pierce raised an eyebrow. "And you want me because? Because you can take whatever they throw at you without breaking. You know how to control yourself. You know when to act and when to wait. And if things go very wrong..." She trailed off. "I know how to handle that too." Pierce finished for her. He knew what she wasn't saying. His service record had more black ink than readable text. The missions no one could know about. The skills no normal diplomat would have. He was being sent as a message, one the aliens wouldn't understand until it was too late. "Just try not to kill anyone on the first day," Bennett said with a small laugh that didn't reach her eyes. The transport ship shuddered slightly as it docked with the station. Pierce gathered his few belongings. He traveled light, always had. The small suitcase contained clothes and personal items, nothing that would raise suspicion during the standard security checks. What wouldn't show up on scans was his intensive training. His body itself was a weapon, with enhanced reflexes and strength from years of military genetic treatments. His mind was just as dangerous, trained to notice everything, to read body language across multiple species, to remain calm under any pressure. "The Council thinks we're sending another academic," Bennett said as they walked to the airlock. "They expect someone who will complain to Earth when they make things difficult. Someone who will eventually give up and go home." Pierce nodded. "And instead, they get me." "Exactly. Remember your cover story. You're a career diplomat who specialized in conflict zones on Earth. That explains any combat scars or reflexes they might notice. Nothing in your background suggests special operations." As they reached the airlock, Bennett stopped and extended her hand. "Good luck, Commander. Earth is counting on you." Pierce shook her hand firmly. "I'll do my job, Admiral." The airlock cycled and the door opened to reveal 2 aliens waiting on the other side. One was tall and thin with blue-gray skin and 4 arms, a Talarian, according to Pierce's briefing. The other was short and stocky with tough orange hide. Krell? Both wore the formal robes of Council security. "Welcome to Central Station, Earth Representative Pierce," the Talarian said in slightly accented English. "I am Security Chief Nex. We will escort you to your quarters." Pierce picked up his bag and stepped through the airlock. The gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth standard, and the air had a faint sweet smell to it. "Thank you, Chief Nex," Pierce replied with a polite nod. "I look forward to beginning my duties." As they walked through the gleaming corridors of the station, Pierce quietly observed everything. He counted security cameras, noted the positions of guard posts, identified potential choke points and exit routes, old habits that had kept him alive through decades of dangerous missions. The human ambassador's quarters are in the observer section, level 42, the Krell guard said gruffly. The first council session you may attend will be tomorrow at Station Cycle 7. Pierce noted the slight emphasis on may attend. A small reminder that humans were merely tolerated, not welcomed. I appreciate the information, Pierce replied calmly. They passed aliens of various shapes and sizes in the corridors. Some had multiple limbs. Others moved on something like caterpillar tracks. A few floated in transparent bubbles filled with strange gases. Pierce received many curious looks and more than a few hostile glares. One group particularly caught his attention. 3 tall reptilian aliens with crimson scales and elaborate gold-trimmed uniforms. They watched him pass with cold, calculating eyes. Vraxians, the Talarian security chief said quietly, noticing Pierce's glance. They lead the conservative faction in the council, not particularly fond of newcomers, especially humans. Pierce simply nodded, but made a mental note. The Vraxians matched the description of the species most suspected of arranging the accidents that had befallen previous human diplomats. They finally arrived at his quarters. The door slid open to reveal a spacious but simple room with furniture designed to accommodate human physiology. Your credentials and schedule are loaded in the station computer system, Chief Neck said. You may contact station security if you require assistance. Morning meal is available in the observer section dining hall. With that, the 2 security officers left him alone. Pierce did a careful sweep of the room, checking for surveillance devices. He found 3 standard security cameras in the main living area. He left those untouched. Any diplomat would expect some monitoring. What the council security didn't know was that his cybernetic implants could detect and jam additional surveillance if needed. He unpacked his few belongings and sat at the desk. The computer terminal activated at his presence, displaying his schedule. First on the list was a welcome meeting with senior council member Zeltharim. Pierce allowed himself a small smile. His mission had begun. He would play the patient, diplomatic, human, absorbing whatever tests and provocations the council members threw at him. He would gather information, build connections, identify which species might be sympathetic to humans and which were enemies, and when the council eventually made their big move against him, as Admiral Bennett was certain they would discover too late that they hadn't been dealing with a diplomat at all. They had been harboring death in disguise. 3 weeks passed, and Alan Pierce settled into a routine at the Galactic Council Station. Each morning he reviewed reports from Earth. Each afternoon, he attended council sessions where he sat silently in the observer section. Each evening, he wrote detailed notes about what he had seen and heard. The council members largely ignored him. Occasionally, one would make a comment about humans being primitive or dangerous. Pierce just smiled politely and said nothing. He was gathering information, learning the patterns of the station, studying each species and their weaknesses. On the 22nd day, Pierce was invited to a reception hosted by the Eldari delegation. The Eldari were tall, elegant aliens with pale skin that seemed to glow slightly. They were known as moderates in the council, neither friendly nor hostile toward humans. "We are pleased you could join us, Representative Pierce," said the Eldari ambassador, a willowy female named Lyra. "It is tradition to invite new observers to share our cultural ceremonies." Pierce nodded respectfully. "I'm honored by the invitation, Ambassador Lyra." The reception was held in a large room with windows looking out into space. About 40 aliens from different species mingled, drinking various colored liquids from crystal glasses. Soft music played from hidden speakers. Pierce accepted a glass of blue liquid from a server. He pretended to sip it while watching the other guests. His enhanced senses detected something wrong with the drink, a subtle chemical smell that shouldn't be there. A Vargosi diplomat approached him. The Vargosi were short aliens with gray skin and large eyes. This one wore elaborate gold jewelry that marked him as a high-ranking official. "Ah, the human representative. I am Delegate Sorv. Are you enjoying our traditional Vargosi spirit? It is a favorite at these gatherings." Pierce smiled. It's interesting. Different from Earth drinks. The Vargosi's large eyes blinked rapidly. Please finish it. It is considered respectful in our culture. Pierce knew exactly what was happening. His briefing files had mentioned that Vargosi regularly consumed certain chemicals that were harmless to them, but toxic to humans. This wasn't a cultural exchange. It was the first test. Of course, Pierce said. He raised the glass to his lips, but only pretended to drink. Years of undercover work had taught him many tricks. Quite refreshing. The Vargosi looked surprised, then disappointed. Indeed, if you'll excuse me, I must greet other guests. As the alien walked away, Pierce discreetly emptied his glass into a plant when no one was looking. His suspicion was confirmed. The liquid had caused the plant's leaves to curl slightly. Later that evening, Pierce reported the incident in his secure communication to Admiral Bennett. First attempt was made. Vargosi, poison in a drink. Nothing serious. Would have caused illness, but probably not death. They're testing my awareness level. 3 days later, Pierce was walking through a less populated section of the station when 2 large aliens stepped out from a side corridor. He recognized them as Draxians, a warrior species known for their strength and aggressive tendencies. Both wore security uniforms with the Council emblem. Human, one said gruffly. You are in a restricted area. Show identification. Pierce knew this was a lie. He had carefully studied the station maps, and this area was open to all diplomatic personnel. I believe there is a misunderstanding, Pierce said calmly. This section is marked as accessible to all diplomatic staff. The Draxian security officers moved closer. You are mistaken. Humans often get confused by our superior station design. Pierce noticed their hands moving toward their weapons. This was the second test, more direct than the first. He could smell the aggression hormones coming from the Draxians. They wanted an excuse. Perhaps I made an error, Pierce said, sounding apologetic. I'll return to the main diplomatic section. Too late, said the first Draxian. We must verify your identity and purpose here. Come with us for questioning. They reached for his arms, their grip painfully tight on a normal human. Pierce allowed himself to be moved a few steps, analyzing the situation. The corridor was empty. No witnesses, no cameras in this section. The Draxians were speaking their native language to each other, thinking Pierce couldn't understand. Break a few bones. Nothing fatal. Just enough to send a message, one said to the other in their clicking language. Pierce had learned Draxian during his preparation for this mission. He understood every word. Now he knew this was definitely not a misunderstanding. The Draxians pushed him toward a small maintenance room. As they opened the door, one shoved him hard from behind, expecting him to fall. Pierce pretended to stumble but kept his balance perfectly. Stronger than he looks, one Draxian commented to the other. The door closed behind them. Now they were alone in a small room with various tools and equipment. One Draxian pulled out restraints. You will be properly detained for questioning. Human. Pierce decided it was time to reveal a small fraction of his capabilities, but not too much. These were just pawns in a larger game. The first Draxian reached for him. Pierce moved with practiced precision, much faster than any normal human should be able to. He twisted away from the grab, then used the alien's momentum to send him stumbling into the wall. The second Draxian looked shocked, then angry. You dare resist Council security? Both aliens now came at him together. Pierce calculated exactly how much skill to show. Too little, and he might actually get injured. Too much, and his cover would be compromised. He dodged the first punch, blocked the second, and delivered a precise strike to a nerve cluster on the first Draxian's arm. The alien's limb went temporarily numb. The second Draxian managed to land a glancing blow on Pierce's shoulder, enough to bruise a regular human badly, but barely noticeable to him. Pierce allowed himself to be backed against the wall, then suddenly dropped down and swept the legs of both attackers. They crashed to the floor, surprised by the human's unexpected fighting ability. Before they could recover, Pierce was standing over them. I believe there's been a serious misunderstanding. Perhaps we should discuss this with Chief Nex of Station. Security? The Draxians looked at each other, then slowly got to their feet. Their plan had failed. The human was supposed to be easily intimidated or injured. Instead, he had fought back effectively without seriously hurting them. A diplomatic response to an undiplomatic incident. That will not be necessary, the first Draxian said grudgingly. You may return to your quarters. This was a training exercise. Pierce straightened his uniform. Of course. I understand completely. The next day, Pierce was summoned to meet with High Counselor Zeltharim. The High Counselor was a Talarian, one of the founding species of the Galactic Council. Representative Pierce, Zeltharim said, his four hands making formal greeting gestures. I must apologize for the regrettable incident yesterday. The Draxian security officers were overzealous in their duties. Pierce nodded respectfully. These things happen, High Counselor. No permanent harm was done. Still, we hope Earth's representative understands that not all species welcome human participation in galactic affairs. I understand perfectly, Pierce replied, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Later, in his secure quarters, Pierce sent another encrypted message to Admiral Bennett. Second test complete. Physical confrontation with Draxian security. They expected an easy target. I showed enough skill to defend myself without exposing my true capabilities. The Council is definitely testing human limits systematically. These incidents are coordinated at high levels, waiting for their next move. Alan Pierce sat quietly in the back of the Council chamber, watching the representatives argue about trade routes. He had been on the station for 6 weeks now. The tests and provocations continued, growing bolder each time. Yesterday, the air filtration in his quarters had mysteriously failed for 2 hours. A normal human might have suffered oxygen deprivation. Pierce had simply switched to his emergency training and controlled his breathing until the system was repaired. As the council members debated, Pierce studied them carefully. He had begun to notice patterns. Not all species participated in the harassment campaign against him. Some actually seemed troubled by the incidents. The Talarians, led by High Counselor Zeltharim, maintained a neutral stance in public, but often intervened when things went too far. The Novan Collective, a hive mind species that looked like tall, slender humans with silver skin, had twice warned Pierce indirectly about upcoming accidents. Most surprisingly, the insectoid Zethi, who had initially seemed most hostile to humans, had recently begun showing signs of disapproval when other council members discussed Earth. Representative Pierce, do you have anything to add to this discussion? The question came from Ambassador Zox, a Vraxian whose crimson scales gleamed under the chamber lights. Zox had emerged as the most openly antagonistic toward humanity. Pierce stood up slowly. Earth has no position on the serious trade routes at this time, Ambassador. We are still learning the complexities of galactic commerce. Of course, Zox said with a dismissive gesture. Humanity is still crawling out of its primitive origins. Perhaps in another century, you might have something valuable to contribute. Several council members laughed. Pierce simply nodded and sat down again. Let them think their insults bothered him. Let them believe he was just enduring their abuse. Every interaction gave him more information. After the session ended, Pierce walked back toward his quarters. He noticed Dr. Elaine Wright, the human, scientific attaché, waiting in a quiet corridor. She was a brilliant xenobiologist who had been stationed here 6 months before Pierce arrived. Commander, she said quietly when he approached. Walk with me to the observation deck? They moved through the station corridor side by side, not speaking until they reached the large viewing area that looked out into space. It was empty at this hour, and Pierce's scans detected no active surveillance devices. You're not just taking their abuse, Wright said softly, staring out at the stars. You're mapping out allegiances. Pierce gave her an appraising look. Smart observation. I worked intelligence before xenobiology, she admitted. These attacks aren't random. Someone's building consensus for something bigger. Pierce nodded slightly. How would you feel about some unofficial outreach to the Talarian delegation? Wright smiled. I thought you'd never ask. Over the next 2 weeks, Pierce and Wright worked carefully to build connections with potential allies. Wright arranged seemingly casual meetings with the Tellarian scientific team. Pierce used his limited free access to quietly observe which species interacted positively with each other. During a routine meal in the diplomatic dining hall, a young Tellarian scientist named Mira approached Pierce's table. "Representative Pierce," she said formally, "my research team is studying human cultural adaptation to space environments. Would you be willing to answer some questions?" Pierce recognized the cover for what it was. "I'd be happy to assist your research, Scientist Mira." They sat in a quiet corner of the hall pretending to discuss human culture while actually exchanging critical information. "The Tellarian delegation is concerned," Mira said quietly. "What is happening to you violates council principles. Hi, Councillor Zeltharim has tried to intervene privately, but the Vraxian faction grows stronger." "Why are they so focused on humans?" Pierce asked. Mira's 4 hands made a nervous gesture. "Your species expanded too quickly, claimed too many star systems before making contact with the Council. The Vraxians lead the militant faction that believes aggressive species must be contained early. They did the same to the Dravak Imperium 2 centuries ago. And what happened to the Dravak?" "They no longer exist," Mira said simply. Pierce kept his face neutral, but inwardly he processed this disturbing information. "The harassment is building toward something. What is their plan?" Mira looked around carefully before leaning closer. "The convergence ceremony happens in 3 weeks. All 17 council species will attend. Ambassador Zox plans to use that occasion to make an example of Earth." "What kind of example?" "A public execution of Earth's representative. You, Commander Pierce." Pierce's expression didn't change. "Thank you for this information. I need one more thing. Access to the station's security protocols." Mira looked shocked. "That would be extremely difficult and dangerous to obtain." "More dangerous than what's coming?" Pierce asked quietly. The next day, a new incident occurred. While Pierce was in the exercise facility, 3 Krell warriors entered. They were not subtle. "Human," the largest one growled. "This facility is now closed for maintenance." Pierce continued his workout, lifting weights designed for Tellarians that would be extremely heavy for a normal human. The schedule didn't mention any maintenance. The Krell moved closer, forming a triangle around him. "Leave now or we will remove you." Pierce set down the weights carefully. "I seem to be having a lot of these encounters lately, almost as if someone is testing me." The lead Krell laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. "Testing? No. Warning. Humans are not welcome here. Soon everyone will understand why." Pierce could have disabled all 3 Krell in seconds. Their species was strong but slow, with vulnerable nerve clusters at the base of their thick necks. But that would show too much of his true capabilities. Instead, he simply walked toward the door. As he passed the lead Krell, the alien stuck, out a foot to trip him. Pierce accidentally stepped on the Krell's foot with his full weight, grinding down briefly. The Krell yelped in pain. "My apologies," Pierce said. "Human clumsiness." That evening, Dr. Wright came to Pierce's quarters with a data crystal. "From our Tellarian friend," she said, handing it to him. "Partial access to security systems. It's the best they could do without being detected." Pierce inserted the crystal into his secure terminal. Security protocols, guard rotations, and emergency override codes appeared on the screen. "This is good," he said. "Now we need to contact Earth without using the official channels. The Vraxians are almost certainly monitoring those." Wright nodded. "I have access to the Science Division's deep space array. We can piggyback a tight beam transmission on their regular data burst tomorrow." Pierce began composing a message to Admiral Bennett. "We need to be ready before the convergence ceremony. If the Vraxians want to make a statement about humans, we'll give them one they'll never forget." "What exactly are you planning, Commander?" Wright asked, studying his face. Pierce looked up from the terminal. "Something they're not expecting. They think they're dealing with a diplomat who can fight a little better than average. They have no idea who they're actually dealing with." "Right. smiled grimly. I almost feel sorry for them. Don't, Pierce replied. They've been planning to kill humans since before we arrived. We're just going to show them why that's a very bad idea. As Wright left, Pierce turned back to the security protocols. The Vraxians and their allies had spent weeks testing his limits, looking for weaknesses, building toward their big move at the convergence ceremony. They thought they were hunting him. They didn't realize they were actually helping him prepare. Death was coming to the Galactic Council, but not in the way they expected. The day of the convergence ceremony arrived. The station buzzed with activity as representatives from all 17 council species prepared for the grand event. Security was tight, with Vraxian guards posted at every major junction. Alan Pierce stood in his quarters adjusting his formal diplomatic uniform. The dark blue fabric was designed to look like standard Earth diplomatic attire, but it contained several hidden features. The material could stop most energy weapons. Small tools were concealed in the seams. The collar contained emergency breathing apparatus. Dr. Wright entered after a brief knock. She wore the formal white uniform of the scientific division. Everything is in place, she said quietly. The Tellarians have warned those sympathetic to our cause to be prepared. The Novan Collective and the Zethi have agreed to remain neutral at minimum. Pierce nodded. And the message to Earth? Delivered. Admiral Bennett confirms that the fleet is on standby at the edge of the system. They can be here in minutes if needed. Pierce checked his personal communicator one last time. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. This needs to be handled inside the council. Outside military intervention would only prove the Vraxians right about humans. They walked together through the corridors toward the Grand Hall. The massive chamber had been decorated for the convergence ceremony, with banners representing each council species. Thousands of representatives filled the tiered seating around a central platform. Remember your position, Pierce told Wright as they approached the entrance. Stay close to the Tellarian science team. If things go badly, get to evacuation point 3. Wright gave him a concerned look. And what about you? Pierce smiled slightly. I'll be fine. This isn't my first ambush. They separated at the entrance. Pierce took his assigned seat in the observer section, noting the subtle security movements around the chamber. Vraxian elite guards stood at key positions, their scaled hands resting on energy weapons. The Krell warriors who had confronted him in the exercise room were stationed near the main exits. As Pierce scanned the room, he noticed something concerning. The Tellarian delegation isn't here, he said quietly into his concealed communicator. Wright's voice came back a moment later. They've been delayed. Security checkpoint issues. This wasn't part of the plan. Pierce had expected complications. They were warned away. Zox doesn't want any interference. The ceremony began with elaborate music and light displays. Representatives from each species took turns at the central podium, speaking about unity and cooperation. Pierce counted down, silently, waiting for the signal. When Ambassador Zox rose to approach the podium, Pierce knew the moment had arrived. Before we proceed with traditional observances, Zox announced, his reptilian voice echoing through the chamber, the council must address a security matter of grave concern. A low hum filled the room as the massive doors sealed shut. Earth has sent among us not a diplomat but an infiltrator, a military operative with known ties to human extermination programs. All eyes turned to Pierce. Commander Alan Pierce, Zox continued, you are hereby detained for crimes against council species and conspiracy against galactic peace. Armed guards surrounded Pierce's position. Dr. Wright, seated with the scientific teams across the chamber, tensed visibly. This is it, Pierce whispered into his communicator. Remember your instructions. He stood slowly, straightening his uniform as the guards approached with weapons drawn. The chamber fell silent, thousands of alien eyes watching the drama unfold. I came here in peace, Pierce said clearly, his voice carrying through the quiet hall. I endured your attacks, your insults, your attempts to provoke humanity into rash action. He locked eyes with Zox. You should have taken the hint. Pierce pressed a hidden control in his sleeve. Throughout the grand hall, The lights flickered once, then died. Emergency lighting came on seconds later, casting the chamber in a dim red glow. In that brief moment of darkness and confusion, Pierce moved. His body, enhanced by decades of military genetic treatments and cybernetic implants, worked at peak efficiency. He moved faster than any normal human could, disarming the two nearest guards before they realized what was happening. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Some representatives fled toward the sealed exits. Others watched in stunned silence. The Vraxian guards fired their weapons, but Pierce was already gone from his previous position. Moving through the shadows at the edge of the chamber, Pierce systematically disabled the security systems he had studied from the Tellarian data. Weapon scanners went offline. Door locks malfunctioned. Communication channels jammed. A Krell warrior spotted him and charged, swinging a heavy shock baton. Pierce sidestepped the attack with fluid grace, striking precisely at the nerve cluster at the base of the alien's thick neck. The Krell collapsed, instantly. "What is happening?" Zox demanded from the central podium. "Restore full power immediately." Pierce made his way toward the central platform, disabling 3 more guards with quick, efficient movements. He wasn't killing anyone. That wasn't the mission. He was demonstrating. From the science section, Dr. Wright activated her part of the plan. The large display screens around the chamber suddenly came to life, showing recorded footage of the accidents arranged for Pierce over the past weeks. The poisoned drink, the Draxian attack, the air system failure. Each incident was shown alongside classified Vraxian communications ordering the attacks. "This human has endured 17 assassination attempts in 8 weeks, Wright's voice announced over the chamber's speaker system, all ordered by Ambassador Zox and his allies. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Many council representatives turned to stare at the Vraxian delegation. Zox's scales darkened with rage. "These are fabrications. The human has hacked our systems." As Zox ranted, he didn't notice the shadow moving behind him. Pierce had reached the central platform, slipping past the elite guards with ease. He appeared behind Zox like a ghost, a thin blade suddenly pressed against the Vraxian's throat. "I suggest you reconsider your statement, Ambassador," Pierce said calmly. The chamber fell silent again. 2 Vraxian guards raised their weapons. "I wouldn't," Pierce advised them. "My blade is pressed against your ambassador's primary artery. He would be dead before I hit the ground." The guards hesitated, looking to their leader for instructions. Zox stood perfectly still, feeling the sharp edge against his scales. "The doors remain sealed," Pierce said loudly, addressing the entire chamber. "They will open when I choose. Until then, I believe we need to have an honest conversation about the Vraxian plan for humanity." High Counselor Zeltharium's voice came over the communication system. "This is most irregular, Representative Pierce. Release Ambassador Zox immediately." "With respect, High Counselor, I must decline," Pierce replied. "For too long, the Council has allowed certain factions to operate outside its own laws. Today, we address that problem." Pierce pressed a control on his sleeve again. The large screens changed to show new information. Classified Vraxian military. Orders planning an attack on Earth colonies. "The harassment I faced was just the beginning," Pierce said. "The Vraxians plan to use this ceremony to justify military action against human worlds, to make Earth an example, as they did with the Dravak centuries ago." Gasps and murmurs spread through the chamber. Several council members rose from their seats in protest. "These documents are verified as authentic by Tellarian encryption experts," Wright added from her position. The attack was scheduled to begin immediately after the ceremony. Pierce looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from various species. "I came here as a diplomat. I endured your tests. Now you know what one human can do when provoked. Imagine what billions would do if attacked." The Grand Hall remained silent, the representatives stunned by both the revelations and Pierce's demonstration of his capabilities. The trap had been set for him, but he had turned it completely around. Now came the most dangerous part of his plan. The Grand Hall remained frozen in shock. Pierce held Ambassador Zox at blade point on the central platform. while thousands of alien representatives watched in silence. The Varaxian guards stood with weapons ready but did not dare to fire. "What happens now, human?" Zox asked, his voice low enough that only Pierce could hear. "You cannot escape this station alive." "I'm not trying to escape," Pierce replied calmly. "I'm trying to prevent a war." Pierce raised his voice to address the entire chamber. "For those unfamiliar with human history, Earth developed in isolation, fighting ourselves for millennia before reaching the stars. The diplomatic corps you've been tormenting isn't comprised of academics. They're veterans of conflicts you cannot imagine." He applied slight pressure to the blade, drawing a drop of Varaxian blood. "I am not an exception, I am the rule." From the observer section, Dr. Wright activated another display. Detailed evidence of the conspiracy against Earth's representative appeared before the assembly. Communication records, assassination orders, the planned execution. "Humanity didn't send me because I'm skilled at making peace," Pierce continued. "They sent me because I'm skilled at surviving, at revealing threats, at eliminating them when necessary." The main doors to the Grand Hall suddenly opened. The Talarian delegation entered, led by High Counselor Zeltharim. They were accompanied by representatives from 6 other council species. "The council is divided," announced Zeltharim, his voice carrying across the chamber. "Those who orchestrated this plot have violated our most sacred principles. We stand with humanity against such treachery." The Novan Collective's representative, a tall, silver-skinned being, stepped forward. "The collective confirms these documents are authentic. The Varaxian faction planned to use today's ceremony as justification for military action against human worlds." Sethi Ambassador Klazak, whose insectoid form towered over the others, clicked his mandibles in what Pierce recognized as a sign of disapproval. "The Zethi opposed humans initially because we believed they were aggressive expansionists. Now we see the Varaxians are the true aggressors." Murmurs spread through the chamber as more council members began to understand the full scope of the conspiracy. Pierce kept his blade steady at Zox's throat, watching the changing dynamics in the room. "This is outrageous," shouted a Krell warchief. "The human has violated council security. He should be executed immediately." "After learning of a plot to execute him," countered a Talarian diplomat. "His actions are clearly self-defense." The Rayon chamber erupted into heated debate. Some species sided with the Varaxians, others with the Talarians. Many remained uncertain, looking back and forth between Pierce and Zox. Pierce knew this moment would determine everything. He had shown the council what one human could do when cornered. Now he needed to show them something else. In a move that surprised everyone, Pierce removed the blade from Zox's throat and stepped back. "I could kill Ambassador Zox right now," Pierce said, his voice cutting through the chaos, "just as your coalition planned to kill me today. But that is not humanity's way." Pierce sheathed his blade and straightened his uniform. "Earth does not seek enemies. We seek partners, equals. Those who would exchange knowledge and resources fairly." He turned to face Zox directly. "Ambassador, your people have existed for thousands of years. You've built wonders across dozens of star systems. Why do you fear us so much?" Zox's scales darkened with anger. "You expanded too quickly. Your kind went from primitive planet-bound creatures to controlling 7 star systems in less than a century. The Varaxian Empire took 5 centuries to claim that many worlds." "So this is about pride?" Pierce asked. "About being outdone?" "It is about survival," Zox hissed. "Species that expand so rapidly inevitably become conquerors. We have seen it before." Pierce nodded slowly. "I understand your fear, but you've misjudged us. Humans fight fiercely when threatened, as I've demonstrated today. But we prefer cooperation when possible." He turned to address the entire chamber. "Earth offers friendship to those who reciprocate. For others," he let the implication hang. "Hi." Counselor Zeltharim moved to the central platform. "This incident reveals deep flaws in our governance. 7 member species have already contacted me to propose reforms that would prevent any faction from acting unilaterally against non-member worlds. The Talarian looked directly at Zox. Those responsible will face justice according to council law. Zeltharim then turned to Pierce. And Earth will be offered full membership status with all rights and protections. The chamber erupted again. Some voices raised in protest, others in support. Zeltharim raised all 4 hands for silence. The vote will be held tomorrow. Now this ceremony is concluded. Security teams not involved in the conspiracy will escort everyone to their quarters while we investigate fully. As council members began filing out of the chamber, Pierce walked calmly to where Dr. Wright waited. "Think they got the message?" he asked quietly. She surveyed the scene. The stunned representatives, the disarmed guards, the Vraxian delegation, under watch by Talarian security. "I believe the diplomatic term is point made," she replied with a slight smile. 3 days later, Pierce stood before the reformed council. The chamber was quieter now, the mood serious. Zeltharim presided. Over the session, "The investigation has confirmed Earth Representative Pierce's claims," Zeltharim announced. "Ambassador Zox and 5 other officials have been removed from their positions and will face trial. The Vraxian government has officially disavowed their actions." He turned to Pierce. "This council extends its formal apology to Earth and to you personally, Commander Pierce. We invite Earth to take its place as a full member of the Galactic Council." Pierce stepped forward. "Earth accepts your apology and your invitation. We look forward to working together for mutual benefit and security." As the session concluded, Pierce transmitted a final secure message to Admiral Bennett. "Mission accomplished. Earth is now a full council member. The Vraxian threat has been neutralized without military action. Request permission to return home." Bennett's reply came quickly. "Well done, Commander. Permission granted. The next transport leaves in 3 days. Earth owes you a debt we can never repay." Pierce smiled slightly as he read the message. He had come here expecting to endure abuse and document threats. Instead, he had transformed humanity's position in the galaxy. That evening, he met with Dr. Wright in the station's observation lounge. The vast sweep of stars spread before them through the transparent wall. "What will you do now?" Wright asked. "Return to Earth?" Pierce nodded. "My work here is done. The new human ambassador arrives next week. A real diplomat this time." "They'll be talking about you for centuries," Wright said. "The human who took down the Vraxian faction single-handedly. That's not the story I want them to remember," Pierce replied. "I want them to remember this as the day the Council learned that humans make better friends than enemies." Wright smiled. "I think they've definitely learned that lesson." As he gazed out at the stars, Pierce felt a rare sense of satisfaction. Throughout his long career, he had been a weapon, precise, deadly, efficient. For the first time, he had used those skills not to destroy but to build. Word spread quickly through the galaxy. Humans might seek peace, but they come prepared for war. Their diplomats arrive with hands extended in friendship, hands that have often held weapons far too long to ever truly forget how to use them. Earth would never face a unified council threat again. The death that came in disguise had ensured that peace would prevail instead.